Hi, I'm Alan Day, CEO and founder of State of Flux, and welcome to The Power of Three, a video series where we interview leading chief procurement officers and executives about three things that have influenced their careers. From books to bosses, from music to movies, we explore the three things that have shaped their success. Join us as we learn from the best of the business here on The Power of Three. I'm honoured and lucky to have Russ Stewart with me, CPO of Tyson Foods, but I first met Russ, probably about 12, 13. I don't know, I'm showing my age. I can't remember these things anymore. As part of the Foundation for Strategic Sourcing, which I know we will cover off through our discussions. But Russ, I'll hand it to you to introduce yourself and three roles that you've had throughout your career and three things you'd like to be known for. So over to you, Russ.
Well, Alan, really appreciate it. I'm honored to have this conversation today. And, you know, the thing I would describe about my career is, I go back to what is my brand? What am I all about? And so for those that have never done that and really thought about what do you want to be all about? What do you enjoy? Strength finders, whatever it may be, do that. It's worthwhile because my journey is one of being a change agent. And so I started when I left the military at Procter & Gamble. I started in Cincinnati and frankly just went about being a change agent. And that led to being asked to go lead and create and frankly to help save the P&G business in China in the mid-90s. And so my wife and I lived in Guangzhou for many years to help, in essence, create a business that would sell to the Chinese consumer and do it successfully. And it was an incredible opportunity. We did some really tremendous things there as a team. That led to spending time in Japan, doing a bunch of global work, and then coming back to the States. And that's where, frankly, I was able to go into this other area of indirect because I really wanted to bring change to Procter & Gamble. And so it's all about bringing change. I went to the indirect spend area, which led to doing major business process outsourcing with Filippo Passerini. We did a bunch of BPO deals with HP and others. And it became a benchmark and a role model for what the CPG industry did in the early 2000s. And then that led to running some external supply chains. Again, wanted to bring change into how P&G leveraged external supply chains, which led to the creation of F4SS, Alan, where myself and one of the key leaders from J&J at the time, Brian Slobodo, we just were frustrated with a whole host of challenges with the contract manufacturing industry. And we felt what better way to accomplish that than to come together. We were not competitors per se, and we weren't going to share anything competitive in terms of secrets, but we thought there was an unlock if we could just come together and have a healthy collaboration and make it easier for suppliers to do business with customers. And that was the whole genesis of F4SS at that time, which has grown to go do tremendous things. Then after that, I went in and did some supply network design, which led to this concept of control tower, which is pretty much an industry terminology in the logistics industry. But I was fortunate to work with a bunch of leaders at P&G saying, what can we do differently? How can we unlock this technology, this capability that didn't exist within P&G so that it could help not only P&G, but it could help the suppliers? And that led to some really great opportunities. And then I was fortunate to join Mars, the big candy and pet food company, as the chief procurement officer of one of their biggest businesses. And so did that for many years. Again, driving change, working with the management team, trying to figure out what is our business strategy? How can we get better? How can we service the customer and consumer better? And to help transform the cost structure. And that led to a global CPO role, doing the same thing for the global CEO and CFO at the time. And then that led to two startups, Alan, which was intriguing. So there's a startup called Smile Direct Club where I was fortunate to work with the co-founders and some of the early business leaders that are still there, where we were able to literally take and transform the distribution model, create omni-channel capability, take it from a fairly small company to a billion-dollar revenue company in a matter of no time. And it was a fun time, doing a lot of stuff with very little and being creative in how we got there. And so I learned a lot in that experience about creativity, working with pace, working with ambiguity. And then I was asked to do something similar at another startup. It didn't work out so well. And that's when Tyson Foods reached out and said, hey, we'd love for you to come and help us make a difference with our consumers and customers. And so that's what really led to where I'm at today. If I were to articulate what are the three roles in that journey that were the most impactful, I'd say the first one really was the experience in China. And what it taught me is to take on the big, audacious risk and be very different in how you think about the business model and act as a business owner. And through that, working as a team, you'll find a solution. The second was becoming the CPO of Mars. It taught me that you can step out there and you can take what you've learned from one area and reapply it and scale it and do even better in another area. And then lastly, I'm very happy to be here at Tyson Foods. We're taking all of those experiences as a collective team and making Tyson Foods a better business. So.
Exciting. I wondered, because as we pointed out at the top, we've known each other for a while, and I wondered whether some of your military roles might have come up in your top three in terms of shaping you. I also wondered, because if my memory serves me correctly, you've got an engineering background.
That's correct.
And interestingly, I think so far in terms of people I've interviewed, 80% of them have engineering backgrounds, which I'm not sure what that says about procurement or me, given my father's an engineer. So I wonder whether maybe I'm just gravitating to engineers there. But I wondered whether, just from some insights, whether that role got close to making your top three list. In terms
it did, Alan. I actually debated it, to be honest, as I was thinking about it. And I am an engineer by training, and also I was a combat engineer in the military. Yeah. And what I'd share with you is I think engineers are trained to think about problem solving and do it in a logical, methodical way. And to me, that's what I've always come back to, and that's why I always kind of gravitate to engineers, is because that's in essence in the DNA of being an engineer. And I think that's why in many cases you have so many leaders, not only in the procurement space, but in other space, that at least have an engineering basic element. Now they may have a master's or an MBA on top of that and other business experience, but that logic and methodical problem solving is, I think, key. And I almost shared my my first duty assignment, Alan. I was with the 1st Infantry Battalion, 1st Combat Engineer Battalion, or 1st Infantry Division, 1st Combat Engineer Battalion. And my first battalion commander, Colonel Sin, literally taught me a lot. And he taught me a lot the hard way and the easy way. But the one thing I'd share with everybody is what he did is he entrusted me to go off. He would be very clear on the objective and his intent, and he'd say, Russ, go figure it out. And I really valued that because it was empowering. And he would give me these missions that others would not do or couldn't do, or he felt they would fail at it. And because of that empowerment, I was able in many cases to think of a creative way with others. It was never just myself, to find a solution following the engineering mindset. What's the problem? What's the logical way to get there? And then sometimes you've got to be creative around the logic on how you solve the problem.
So let's hold that thought, because I will ask you about three bosses later in the discussion.
Sure.
But yeah, really, really interested in hearing that. And again, if you stand back and look at your career, what are the three things that you would like to be known for throughout your kind of time?
Well, that's a great question, Alan. There's a couple things. First off, I want to be known as a leader that is very empowering, that builds teams, builds capability, that leaves a legacy behind. And that's easy to say, but I truly try to walk the walk. I truly believe in this concept of 5E leadership, which is you envision together, you engage, you enroll, you enable, and you execute together. And to me, that's what I want to be known for, is somebody who truly role modeled 5E type of leadership. So that's the first thing. The second thing is I want to be somebody who's known for willing to enable teams and personally take bold risks, willing to fail forward, as I would describe it. John Pepper had a great saying. He was one of the previous highly successful CEOs of P&G in the 90s. Yeah. John was asked the question, what differentiates somebody from another person? to be recognized, to be identified, and ultimately promoted. And John said the Gold Star projects. Somebody who's willing to take risks, that are bold, that are taking on complex issues that many people know exist in the business or opportunities.
Yes.
And they're willing to step forward. And what John said is, in many cases, they're not 100% successful, but they're willing to step out, they're willing to fail forward, and they're willing to get 50% of the way there. And just by doing that, you're differentiating yourself.
Yeah.
And so I want to be known as somebody who not only does that and role models it, but enables the team to do that, provides the safe space to enable that to happen. And then lastly, I just want to be known as somebody who is just relentless on making the business better and being singularly focused on the consumer or customer. What are we all about? And just being singularly focused on that. Because ultimately, by doing that, you build a better business that is sustainable. And by building a better business that's sustainable, I always look around at all the team members and their families that are impacted, our suppliers and their families that are impacted. You're creating something that will last the test of time, that creates value for families, for communities. And to me, it starts there. And if you have success there, there's so much good that can come about from that success.
Very cool. Very cool. So let's get into it. Let's look at sort of some of the kind of power of three pieces there. And we'll start with looking at 3 books that have influenced your career, or frankly you just like as a good read and you'd recommend. So let's start with that, if that's okay, Russ.
Absolutely, Alan. This is a tough one. This will show my age too, Alan. So there was a book in the latter 90s that Tom Peters wrote called The Circle of Innovation. And it's long hit the pile and the dustbin of books, I'm sure, business books. But there was a couple things in that book that really stood out to me. First off, it was about the brand of you. And I come back to how we started this conversation. What is your brand? What are you really excited about? When you get up in the morning, what do you want to go do? What are you excited about doing? What are you not excited about doing? Because pursue your passions. My father used to say, no matter what you do, just be the best at it, and you don't have to worry about anything financially. And so to me, that brand of you is so powerful. The other thing in the book, which was fascinating, again, this is the latter part of the 90s, that Tom Peters, there was a story in there about this, I believe it was a Malaysian businessman that had a company, but it was a virtual company. This is the latter 90s, before technology was what it is today. And he literally had a network of individuals that he relied on that provided his service and delivered his product. But none of them were direct employees of his. I thought that was so advanced for the latter 90s that this concept of the power of a network stood out to me. And so I thought it was a great book. I don't even know. I think you can still get it on Amazon, but that's number 1. Number 2, I go to the tried and true Michael Porter Competitive Advantage.
Yeah.
I think about that. To me, there's so many complex decisions that can be answered very simply by looking at how Michael Porter defines competitive advantage. There's a lot of books on strategy now, where to play, how to win. I'm a big A.G. Lafley fan. Where to Play and How to Win was how he got P&G back on the right course. I had the fortunate opportunity of working with A.G. in Asia at the time when he was leading Asia Pac for P&G. But How to Win comes down to Michael Porter's 4 areas of competitive advantage. You either have a speed advantage, a consumer differentiation advantage. You either have some sort of availability advantage, or what is the 4th advantage? It's cost, the cost advantage. So when you come down to these complex decisions, you really, if you think about it, do I have an advantage in one of those 4 areas? That will answer a lot of questions. It makes a lot of what many people want to, especially anybody that wants to give you advice, it makes it a simple way to answer the question. And then, the last book is one that is the Bible. I think it's truly a book that has a lot of power, and it makes you realize that you're, at least how I think about it, I'm a small speck in this grand scheme, and so I ought to just do everything I can to make things better. and do it with the right integrity. That's just part of my DNA. I went to West Point, Alan, as you know, and
Yes.
and to me, integrity and character are core to what any individual is. And without that, I think you will struggle if you don't have integrity and character and a set of morals in what you do. So it's really those three books are what came to mind.
Yeah, and also probably recognition that human behavior probably really hasn't changed for
absolutely
thousands
not,
of
Alan. I mean,
years.
if you think about it, it's just you're
Yeah.
sitting there going, exactly right. It's unfortunate. Yeah. I'll put it that way.
Yes, yeah, really, really insightful, and yeah, I do love your thoughts there. I still follow Peter's on Twitter. Actually, he's quite active on Twitter, and he's still giving great insights. So yeah, it's interesting. Thank you for that. So if I change it up a little bit, because that kind of gives us some insight into some of your business influences, but let's look at it kind of from a more personal point of view. And I'm going to ask you about 3 movies that have inspired you, or you just like putting your feet up to. So, yeah, what are your thoughts there, Russ?
Well, Alan, you're if anybody views this, they'll realize I'm a very boring individual. So let's start with that. The 3 movies, the first one, and coincidentally, my wife and I just watched this again. Probably a couple months ago, was Gladiator with Russell Crowe, and the reason I like that movie is because it has what we were speaking about a little bit ago. It's got this moral guidance, this character element to it, doing selfless sacrifice element to it. And to me, I always come back to that. And while the ending, I'm assuming most of your viewers will have seen the movie, I hope by now. The ending's tragic. It's actually, I think very, very good in how it ends in that movie. And so that's the one that's one of the ones that came to mind. The other is this movie, which I thought was just one of the great movies, is Ford versus Ferrari. And what I loved about that was a couple things. One is it's based upon a true story, but more importantly, it's based upon this audacious challenge, this goal that you would almost laugh at in the business world or elsewhere, and how a team comes together, taking the best of anybody's capability. It doesn't matter if they're an oddball or what, but you bring a team together, and with the right focus, the right set of conditions, you can achieve that goal. And it takes everybody rowing in the same direction. You're always going to have your setbacks, and it never is a straight line to success. And through that, ultimately in this case is for those that have seen the movie, you have success. So to me, that's another great movie. Yeah. The other I was thinking about was a relatively old one, a tragic movie, Schindler's List.
Okay. Yeah.
And the reason I bring that one up is in the midst of all this tragedy, what you can see is how one person that's willing to take some risk can make a difference.
Yes.
It can make a difference in a huge way, a generational difference. Many times, early in my career, I said, well, why should I take that risk? Well, when you look at the downside, there is no downside. You look at Schindler's List and what that individual is willing to do, huge downside, but willing to do it. But look at the benefits, generational benefits. Generations are here because of what that individual is willing to do. And it was not easy. It was high risk. And, you wonder, would I do that if I were in that situation? You would hope you would, but my goodness, it's, to me, it's
you would hope. You would,
absolutely.
but yeah, I think pressure is an interesting taskmaster. So yeah, excellent. And I love the first 2 have quite a New Zealand connection. The first 2 movies there.
Absolutely. Russell Crowe and Christian Bale.
Bruce McLaren, yeah.
Or Bruce McLaren. Yeah, Bruce McLaren.
Yeah. My father, being an engineer, in fact, my grandfather had the competing garage with Bruce McLaren.
No kidding.
Yeah,
wow.
So, Bruce McLaren's father, I should say. So yeah,
wow, that is neat.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. Right. So we sort of covered movies. If I flick back a bit, and we touched a bit on one of your bosses that you had, but I'm really interested in three bosses that have shaped you throughout because you're an inspiring leader, but that generally comes from what you've learnt along the way. So I'd love to hear how people have shaped you throughout your career from three
Well,
bosses.
three bosses. I stole the thunder. The first one was that first battalion commander that I
Yeah,
mentioned in First Infantry Division. It was Colonel Sin, diehard combat veteran, but and unbelievably high standards. But as I shared, he was clear on what his objective was, what his intent was, and that's the important part. Is he would say not only do this, but my intention in doing this is this, and that's what gave the degrees of freedom and empowerment to find creative solutions. So for those that in the business world, always try to understand what is the intent of that objective, and it may open up those degrees of freedom. Well, I can think about it differently. Then is that okay? That type of approach. So that was the first boss that came to mind. The second boss that came to mind was the boss that sent me to China at P&G. And it was Bruce Sterling. And Bruce was wonderful. He was the CPO at the time. He's the one who asked me. But he was very empowering in the same way. I mean, Bruce literally said, I don't know how you're going to do it, but just let me know, keep in touch. How are we going to do this? And it was very empowering, very empowering, and very supportive. Him and the team would come out and visit very frequently to see what was needed, what help was needed, etc. And then the last boss that comes to mind was my first boss at Mars, was Luc Mongeau. And Luke was great. He was very empowering in a similar way. But what he taught me was more of the power of the heart and how to harness passion. And when you can bring passion together with the true business need, you can tug at the hearts of team members or associates, and you can truly unlock them in a very different way.
yeah.
And to me, that's what I really learned from Luke. So those are the three individuals I would call
Interesting. And have there been sort of quotes along the way that have inspired you that go along with these bosses, or they may be completely independent, but just we've talked about kind of Tom Peters and Michael Porter, etc. But are there certain quotes that you sort of live by or inspire you as well?
There are three I thought about. One is I don't even know who to attribute this quote to, Alan, but when I was younger, when I was in high school, I won't share the full story, but the context is I knew I in the U.S., a lower middle class family, didn't have a lot of money available. I knew I had to either work my way through college or get a college scholarship in some sport. And there was a quote that would motivate me every day. It was, the quality of one's life is in direct proportion to their commitment to excellence. And and it was a picture of an individual working out, trying to get better. And that inspired me because I just got up every day and said, well, if I'm really, really going to do something different, if I'm going to really achieve at least what I thought were the goals at that point in time, I've got to be committed. I've got to have a plan. I've got to do, in some cases, the harder right instead of the easier wrong, is the way I would describe it.
Okay, yeah.
The other quote I think is a Thomas Edison pretty famous one, which I believe it's, at least I've somewhat butchered it, is success is 99% perspiration and 1% inspiration. And I truly believe that with my heart. And the more opportunity I've had to interact with very successful people, Alan, yourself, and others, you always come back to what is that core for your success. And rarely do you find somebody that says, "Well, it was easy." It's never easy. It's always a number of no's, more no's by far than yeses. And so it's, to me, that it always comes back to, you have the intestinal fortitude to figure it out and work harder than somebody else with a good idea and a commitment. And that's the 99% perspiration part.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I will often say, if it was easy, everyone would be doing it. So, you know,
There's no doubt, Alan.
yeah,
The easy button is too easy, and it doesn't
yeah,
exist. There is an
yeah,
easy button, but it doesn't get you anything.
yeah. It doesn't at all. But yeah, yeah. Sometimes you wish.
I wish there were an easy button. There's no doubt.
Oh, but yeah,
And the last is something that is one of my mantras. I'm sure this is somebody's quote, but I always get up and share with everybody I have an opportunity to share with, whether it's my family, my wife, my two boys. Today is your last today. So make the best out of it. So today, you're not going to have another one of these days in 2023. So don't wish it away. It's 24 hours. Make the best out of it. And I always, people will ask me, well, how are you doing? I say, well, I'm doing wonderful. I'm the side of the grass.
yeah,
And I truly mean that. And people will go, wow, but why not be positive? Why not, seize the day, or carpe diem, as many people would say.
Yes. Yeah. No, I love it. I love it. Funny enough, I was talking with Patrice, my wife, last night about making the most of every day, actually. So completely agree. Thank you for that. I'm sure there's a lot more on that list, but thanks for whittling it down to three for us. So if I change it up a bit, because I'm getting some insight in terms of you on a business point of view, bit from the personal, from the movies, but what sort of music either inspires you or relaxes you or just takes you to another place? So I'll ask you about three music tracks that you've thought
about. This will definitely solidify me in that category of being a dud, Alan, and no fun. But the first music track that came to mind was this is an old one, "Unchained Melody" by the Righteous Brothers. I love some of that old Motown music, and coincidentally, that was the song that my wife and I played at our wedding.
Oh, lovely.
So that was one that came to mind. The other was Leonard Skinner's "Freebird."
Okay.
And the reason that came to mind is because of how that song came to be. You may know this, and your viewers may know this, but what happened is one of the roadies that was helping Leonard Skinner, the band at the time, they didn't know this, but he was a concert pianist. And so what happened is they were taping "Freebird" and creating it. They went to lunch. Well, he stayed back because he was just helping them out. But he walked in and started playing what's now on "Freebird" on the piano. And they walked back from lunch stunned because they didn't know he was a concert pianist. And they said, we have to incorporate this into the song. And so it's a 9-minute, and everybody said, no, there's no way, other producers, there's no way anybody will listen to I think it's close to a 9-minute song. There's no way. You can't do a 9. They said, no, we're doing it. And they inserted him into the what's now the song "Freebird," and so I thought that was just I personally love the song, but it's a great story behind the song.
Yeah.
And then I live. My family and I. I'm currently living in Northwest Arkansas, but most recently we were living in Nashville, Tennessee, and so really grown to like U.S. country music. And so, Blake Shelton has a song that's just got a hard tune. I could name a lot of country songs, but Blake Shelton's "God's Country," I think, it just wakes me up. It's got that really hard beat to it, and I like the lyrics.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. That's really cool. So, for me, I mentioned at the top the concept of this power of three has really come from what we do at State of Flux around three things that have gone well and three things that could be improved on. And we found that the first two things come off top of people's head, and it's the third one we've got to listen to. So I'm gonna do that to you now. I'm gonna get you to do three things that you've done well and three things that you could improve throughout your career, if that's all right. So.
Oh, absolutely, Alan. The three things I've done well, I've got a long list of what I haven't done well. So the three things I've done well, one is, I always try to act as a business owner, no matter what role I have. If this were my business, what would I do? And that's always led me to a high probability of the right answer. So that's the one thing I would say is done well for me, is to just always think about the business that way. Is it you come back to, this is not about Russ. This is not about Russ's team. This is about trying to make the business better. Going back to winning with that consumer or customer, so that you can create a business that's self-sustaining and that has all the benefits that we spoke about earlier. The other thing I always try to do well, and this is, I almost debated whether this would be a quote or not. But I think I'm known for somebody who does the harder right instead of the easier wrong. That's in the cadet prayer at West Point.
Yeah, yeah.
And it means a lot, because there's so many times in business, and I'm sure, Alan, you've encountered this, where, boy, I could just take the shortcut and just do it this way. And, I just at least, take care of the situation and move on. But to me, you've got to do the harder right instead of the easier wrong. Because that will ultimately play out over time to your benefit. It really will test your character at times when things get tough, and as we all know, and in the business world they do, and in personal life they do.
I agree.
And so to me, it's always do the harder right instead of the easier wrong. Is something that I think I've tried to role model well. I'm not perfect, but I try to do that. And then the last thing I think I would always encourage others is embrace teamwork. Always be curious. Don't think you have the right answer. And be willing to ask the question of others. Help me understand this. How would you do this? What ideas do you have? How can we make this better? How can we do things different to get to a better outcome? Just that level of curiosity and relentless pursuit of being better is what I would describe as something that I try to do well. I always look at what's the best practice. Always be curious. Always never stop learning is in that bucket of what I think I do well, and I would encourage others to think about that.
Very cool. And so on the flip side, and I know we're kind of similar in the sense that I tend to have a much longer list of things I need to work on and don't really think of the do well ones. But what have made your top three things of things that you think you could tweak or improve when you stand back at your career?
The first thing that came to mind is while I'm very curious on making the business better, I never really look at it from a personal standpoint. I always take that for granted. And what I encourage others to do is, and I call myself the accidental CPO, and there are those that truly want to improve themselves, their position, et cetera. And so reach out and ask and seek advice. I'd love to do it, do it in a collaborative way, do it with the business in mind, but just ask, so boy, we're doing this. What do you think? I'd love feedback on how to get to here. Am I doing the right stuff to help the business? That type of conversation. So improve, having an intentional plan for yourself, and then be willing to engage others and just get their feedback on it is the first thing I would encourage.
Yeah.
The second thing I would say I need to improve on is relationships, is invest in relationships. I am probably one of the worst in staying in touch. And, in today's world of texts and, social media, it's much easier. But I'm still bad at it. And so that's the one thing I'd encourage you. And, and as a result, there's sometimes when, frankly, I could reach out to somebody and I'm a little hesitant, to be honest, Alan, because I feel bad I haven't kept in touch. But what I'll share with everybody is reach out anyhow, because I've been on the opposite end of that, and I've also been on the end that's asking. And what you'll find out is very quickly the other individual will be very open. They'll be glad you reached out. So don't be hesitant. And I would encourage others to nurture relationships. They're important. And I'll be honest, I need to improve in that area. And then, the last thing I'd share is, I talk about be bold and take calculated risks. I like to be a change agent, which I do. There's been a couple times in my career where I didn't. I wasn't as bold as I should have been. And, one time in my career, I had an opportunity, a company wanted me to step out of P&G into a senior level, and I was so close, but I didn't do it. And in hindsight, that's a regret. I should have done it because it would have probably benefited P&G, to be honest. I may have gone back and been able to help them in a different way. But I would just say, don't be afraid to take more risks. Back in the latter 90s, Alan, you'll remember this, during the first dot-com bubble of 2000, there was 4 of us at P&G that put together a business model, and we reviewed it with an angel investor. And this is very early phase of the technology boom. And the angel investor said, I got it. I think this will be big. I'm willing to fund it. And all 4 of us were ecstatic. And he goes, I've got one caveat. We said, what's that? He goes, all of you have to quit your job at P&G. All of us were at P&G at the time. We kind of looked at each other and said, we'll have to get back with you on that one. And we didn't. And so, you wonder if that ever could have been a big opportunity at the end of the day. But it was an interesting time. I could go on and on, Alan.
I hear. No, those are awesome. So thank you so much, Russ, for the insights and into an amazing career to date. What are 3 pieces of advice that you would give someone mid-career or even starting out, and not just in procurement, just in general? What are 3 things that you would kind of give them sort of insight to from your learnings throughout your career?
I would start off with the be bold and take risks, and they're calculated risks, but don't be afraid. You'll always end up on your feet, and don't take foolish risks, meaning don't quit your job, not have a business plan if you want to start a business. Go create a business plan, ask others for input. Does this make sense? What am I missing? And if they feel like it does, I give you the first dot-com bubble example. Why not take a risk? Why not? So be willing to take maybe calculated risks. Be bold in your thinking, because you can achieve much more than I think anybody personally ever believes they can achieve. The second thing I go back to is always act as a business owner. Alan, I share that with my teams throughout my career. I share with my team today. When they'll come up and say, what should we do? Here's the situation. I say, if this were your business, what would you do? And what you'll find is, I would say it's very high 90%, they end up at the right answer, or at least the answer that probably has the highest probability of success. And so always think of it as, if I owned the business and I was trying to continue to delight my consumers and customers, what would I do? And then lastly, there's this element of curiosity, Alan. Always be curious, and be curious in other industries. I'll mention we talked about the contract manufacturing industry previously, where you and I had a chance to meet through F4SS. What I learned in that role at P&G and through the formation of F4SS is I learned about how contract manufacturing was done in other industries. At this time, a company called Flux had a unique business model with Microsoft. So when you think about the Xbox at the time, the Xbox was Microsoft's software and Flextronic hardware. And if you're curious, I remember talking with some people from Flextronics, and I said, well, how does this work? And they said, well, we've got 27 varying types of engineers and some additional planners. They sit right there in the Microsoft campus. They sit with the team. They do the cycle. We know what we're doing, et cetera, et cetera. And that just opens up degrees of freedom where you sit there and say, well, why does P&G do it this way? And so I would challenge P&G and say, well, why do we have so-and-so in the meeting who's relaying information to so-and-so that's an outside party? Just bring the outside party in.
Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah.
We're one team. And so it's that type of curiosity that you'll learn, and at some point you'll come back to it and say, you know what, that thing I learned many years ago, I can apply now, and it can help be the unlocker in a big opportunity.
It's an interesting point you make, and I'll take our listeners slightly off piste here, but this year's book, we do our annual SRM books, and we always have a theme. So last year we were looking at resilience. This year, we think procurement has to change. It's got to move from buying to managing that extended enterprise. So all of a sudden, we are one team, and procurement's role is, writing RFPs. Frankly, AI is going to do that. It's starting to do that already.
Absolutely.
So our kind of reason for being actually has to move to managing this extended enterprise. And that kind of outside-in thinking, I think, is critical to us succeeding as a function. So really glad you touched on it. But
Alan, that is the core, one of the core capabilities that, at least for the foreseeable future, AI and ML will not be able to do, is being able to structure those types of extended enterprise and then managing them effectively and efficiently for everybody involved. That's core to being. I'll share a story, Alan. Is Tom Stallkamp back in the days of Chrysler was their CPO, and he didn't say he was the CPO. He said he was their leader of external operations, and that's exactly what he did. He leveraged that, and they had a cost structure that was very different than GM. That's why Daimler bought them. And unfortunately, Daimler disassembled and dismantled what Tom put together. But that was an early indicator that it can be very successful because they got all of the innovation from the suppliers, the parts suppliers, where GM was beating them up on price, doing RFPs. And you remember the Julio Lopez days.
Yes.
Everybody was getting Lopez. Well, what happened with Chrysler is they got all of the new ideas, the innovations, and that's when Tom said, we'll be core on drivetrains, chassis, and aesthetics. Everything else I want suppliers to bring the innovation to and do it within these cost parameters. And if you looked at their total P&L, their R&D costs were significantly lower than their competitive set, and therefore their gross margins were higher.
Yeah, for me, it's got to be the way everyone goes, and more should be made of the work Tom did. But and it also puts onus. I know you and I have had big discussions around customer of choice, but it means that concept of customer of choice becomes even more important, because when we're managing that extended enterprise, it's all about getting innovation first. It's all about getting scarce resource and so on. All the things that we know customer and choice get. So I think it's going to head in an interesting direction, but maybe more for another chat.
Absolutely.
At some point. Yeah. So look, Russ, hugely appreciate it. As always, I've loved talking with you, and I know listeners will love it as well. So thank you. And we'll look forward to catching up soon. Thank you.
Absolutely, Alan. I really appreciate the opportunity. Hopefully I haven't bored too many people, but I appreciate the opportunity.
Never. Thanks, Russ.
Appreciate it.
Cheers.